Alright guys, so let's start putting this all together. We need to figure out what quadrant theta would lie in given some information. So, first question here, first piece of given information here on the first question says sine of theta is greater than 0. Now, this is a fancy way of saying sine is positive. Where is sine positive? It's positive in quadrants 1 and 2. Okay? Now, cosine of theta is less than 0. That's a fancy way of saying cosine of theta is negative. Where is cosine of theta negative? Cosine of theta is negative in quadrants 2 and 3. So that means theta is in quadrant 2. Why? Because this is true in 1 and 2. This is true in 2 and 3. And so both of these statements can only be true in quadrant 2. Theta will lie in quadrant 2. And we're going to put all of this together in the final video. How about here? Cotangent of theta is greater than 0. This is a fancy way of saying cotangent is positive. Well, I don't work with cotangents, but guess what? If cotangent is positive, so is tangent. So I say all students take. Where is tangent positive? It's positive in 1 and 3. And sine is negative. Well, all students, sine is positive in 1 and 2, which means it's negative in 3 and 4. Where are both of these things true? Theta is in quadrant 3. Okay? Cosecant. I don't do cosecants. So when I see cosecant, my brain says, sine. And remember, if you flip this, the sign, S-I-G-N, does not change. And so if cosecant is negative, sine is negative. Where is sine of theta negative? Quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. Secant, the reciprocal of cosine. Well, if secant's positive, cosine's positive. Where's cosine positive? It's positive in quadrants 1 and 4. And remember, count it out if you need to. All students take calculus. Quadrant 4 is where cosine is positive, 1 and 4. Where do these overlap? Well, they happen to overlap in quadrant 4, so theta is in quadrant 4. Okay? Last one here. Tangent of theta is less than 0, or tangent of theta is negative. Well, all students take. Tangent is positive in 1 and 3, which means it's negative in 2 and 4. And cosine, right? All students take calculus. It's positive in 1 and 4, which means it's negative in 2 and 3. Where's the overlap? Theta is in quadrant 2. So that lets us find what quadrant we would be in. Now, we're going to take what we know, and we're going to piece this together, and we're going to evaluate and find an exact answer. Now, to find these exact answers, you're going to want those triangles that we had earlier, somewhere where you can reference them. So make sure you've got these triangles handy, and I'll plop them up here for every problem. Cosine of 240. What do we got to do? Well, the first thing we've got to figure out is 240 is in quadrant 3. Now, what that means, what is cosine in quadrant 3? All students take. Means tangent's positive, means cosine and sine are negative. So that tells me that my answer is going to be negative. Okay? 240. I don't have 240 on my magic sheet here. So I got to find an angle that's on my magic sheet. Well, theta prime for 240 is 60. So basically what I'm finding when I ask you to find cosine of 240 is you're actually finding the cosine of 60 in quadrant 3. So cosine of 60 is what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. This is equal to 1/2, and it's negative because it's in quadrant 3. So you got to figure out your reference angle, you got to figure out your quadrant, and then you put those two together to find your answer. Cool. Cosecant of 120 is 1 over the sine of 120. What does that mean? That means I'm going to find the sine of 120 and I'm going to flip it. Well, where is 120? It is in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2. All students. Okay, so that means sine is positive in quadrant 2. Cool. And my reference angle, 120. Well, my nearest x-axis is 180. So that's going to be, guess what? 60 again. So what is the sine of 60? Well, you go to your drawing. What is the sine of 60? It is opposite over hypotenuse, which would be root 3 over 2. Flip that, and you get what? 2 over root 3. And if you rationalize that, and again, it's positive, rationalize that, you get what? 2 root 3 over 3. And that's how we answer that question. Cotangent of 330. It's 1 over the tangent of 330. Cool. All right, what quadrant is 330 in? It's in quadrant 4. And the reference angle for 330 degrees is 30 degrees because the nearest x-axis is 360. And again, you're going to have to draw these pictures. If you don't see this, draw the pictures like the previous examples. Okay, well, I've got that angle, which is in my special triangles. And tangent in quadrant 4, well, all students take calculus. Cosine is positive. What does that mean? Sine and tangent are negative. So I know whatever the answer is, it's negative. Cool. Let's find 30 degrees. So here's 30 degrees. What's the tangent of 30? Opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to jot it down. It's 1 over root 3. But I don't want that. I want the reciprocal of that. Well, if you take 1 over root 3 and you flip it, what do you get? You just get root 3. Boom. Okay. Secant of 3 pi by 4. Again, what is secant? It is 1 over cosine. Okay. Actually, I should write 3 pi by 4 here. Okay, instead of theta. All right. Where is 3 pi by 4? Where is 3 pi by 4? Well, it's a little bigger than pi by 2, but smaller than pi. So that falls in quadrant 2. All right. All students. Sine is positive, which means cosine is negative. All right, so we'll put a negative here. Cool. And what's the reference angle? By the way, this is the one place where radians really shine, is because the denominators for these exact values are only a few possible choices. And so 3 pi by 4, the reference angle will be pi by 4, which is 45 degrees. So what I'm really asking you is, what's 1 over the cosine of 45 in quadrant 2? Okay, well, what's the cosine of 45? The cosine of 45 is adjacent over hypotenuse. It's 1 over root 2. Flip that, and you just get root 2. And the negative comes from the quadrant we're in. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so let's do these last two here. Sine of 5 pi by 4. What do I know? Well, 5 pi by 4 is a little bigger than pi. So that means I'm in quadrant 3. And the reference angle is pi by 4 because that's what the denominator is. Cool. All students take T. What does that mean? Tangent's positive in quadrant 3, which means sine is negative. Cool. What's the sine of pi by 4? Well, the sine of pi by 4 is 1 divided by root 2, so it's negative 1 divided by root 2, which rationalizes to negative root 2 over 2. Okay? Last one, cosine of 210. 210 is in quadrant 3 because it's bigger than 180. And in quadrant 3, all students take. Okay, that means tangent's positive. Sine and cosine are negative. My answer has to be negative. Cool. What is 210? 210 is a really fancy way to write 30 degrees. Okay, theta prime is 30 degrees. So what is the cosine of 30 degrees? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So root 3 over 2. So I get negative root 3 over 2. Okay, so that is how we use All Students Take Calculus and reference angles to evaluate the exact value of trig functions using our two special right triangles. Guys, I hope this helps you, and we're going to do video 4 in just a second.